All right, let's do this. A deep dive into The Hobbit. I am so excited. We're going straight to the source today, excerpts from the book itself. I think we all know the basic story, but let's uncover those hidden gems, those details that make it so impactful, even today.
Well, I think one of the most fascinating things about The Hobbit is how it came to be. Tolkien never set out to write a classic.
Wait, really?
It was literally a story for his kids.
So like bedtime stories from an Oxford professor?
Yeah.
A scholar of language and mythology? I love it.
Yeah. But this bedtime story ended up captivating readers worldwide. I mean, when it was published, the Times called it one of the most influential books of our generation.
Okay, so we've got this seemingly simple story with a huge impact. What is it about Bilbo Baggins that grabs us like that?
Well, Bilbo, he's this peaceful hobbit, loves his routines, his comforts, elevenses, a nice fire in the hobbit hole.
Classic Hobbit things.
Absolutely. Then Gandalf the wizard shows up with 13 dwarves. They basically turn Bilbo's world upside down.
Yeah, I can't imagine my reaction if 13 dwarves just showed up at my door expecting to go on a quest.
You and Bilbo both. He's terrified. He just wants his quiet life back.
But they're persistent, those dwarves. And from the excerpts, it seems like Gandalf is really pushing for Bilbo to join them, isn't he?
Oh, yeah. He keeps hinting at the adventure, the potential for, profit. And despite himself, Bilbo's kind of intrigued.
So even in this children's story, we get this exploration of how our desires, and maybe even our family history, shape our choices. Bilbo's got that Tookish side, known for a bit of adventure.
Exactly. Tolkien was a master at weaving those deeper layers into his work, and the adventure really kicks off with that hilarious encounter with the trolls.
All those trolls bumbling around arguing about how to cook the dwarves. I remember laughing out loud reading those parts.
It's classic Tolkien humor, but it's also where we see Bilbo's cleverness. He's not a warrior, but he uses his wits to save the day.
Right. And in those excerpts, I noticed something that maybe some readers overlook. It's not just cooking supplies in that troll cave.
You're talking about the swords. That's a crucial detail.
Yes. Gandalf finds Orcrist and Glamdring, these amazing elven blades.
Powerful, ancient weapons.
But then there's Bilbo. He finds this little knife. It almost seems insignificant compared to those other swords.
But it's not insignificant at all. It's like a short sword for a hobbit. It represents Bilbo's own potential, a strength he doesn't even realize he has yet.
I get it. Everyone underestimates hobbits, but Bilbo, with his little knife, he's going to prove that even the smallest can be the bravest.
Exactly. That sword, it plays a surprisingly important role as the story unfolds.
And speaking of important roles, Gandalf, his power really shines during their escape from the goblins.
Oh, yeah. Gandalf, he's a force of nature, but he can't be everywhere at once. When those wargs attack, the dwarves are on their own. Those evil wolves, allied with the goblins. That's a terrifying encounter.
I can imagine. It's like Tolkien is constantly upping the stakes. You go from these bumbling trolls to cunning goblins, then to these ferocious wargs, and it's all happening so fast.
And we're still just in the early stages of the journey. But before we get to Mirkwood and the, let's just say interesting elves, we need to talk about Beorn.
Beorn, oh my goodness. A shapeshifter who can turn into a bear. That's not something you see every day, even in Middle-earth.
He's one of the most enigmatic characters in the story. Powerful, yet surprisingly compassionate.
Yeah. He's initially wary of the dwarves, but eventually becomes a valuable ally.
He offers them shelter, guidance, and let's not forget, those amazing feasts.
I was getting hungry just reading those descriptions. But then, the relative safety of Beorn's home gives way to Mirkwood. Talk about a shoe-in mood.
Mirkwood, it's a place of both enchantment and danger. Giant spiders, disorienting darkness, and a creeping sense of dread that just clings to you as you read those passages.
And then the wood elves. They're not exactly what you'd expect from elves, are they?
No, they're not. They highlight Tolkien's ability to complicate these ideas of good and evil.
They're not inherently wicked, but deeply distrustful of outsiders.
Especially dwarves.
So they end up imprisoning the company, seeing them as a potential threat.
But even in their actions, you see how fear and suspicion can drive even those who seem good. And their beautiful underground halls are a reminder that beauty can exist in the darkest of places.
Throughout all of this, I keep thinking about Bilbo. He's gone from trolls to goblins, wolves, giant spiders, and now these distrustful elves. At this point, he must be wondering why he ever agreed to leave his hobbit hole.
Oh, he is! But he keeps going. That's what's so fascinating about him. He's not your typical hero. He's scared, but he finds this inner strength to face each challenge.
And now we're heading towards the heart of the story. Smaug, and the Lonely Mountain.
The reason for the whole adventure.
But it's more than just a treasure hoard, right? It's the dwarves' ancestral home. And Smaug, he represents everything that was lost.
He's the embodiment of greed, destruction, the danger of clinging to the past.
And it's Bilbo, this little hobbit, invisible, thanks to the ring, who faces him. That scene where he's standing before this fire-breathing dragon, it's one of the most vivid parts of the book.
David versus Goliath.
But Bilbo uses his wits. He engages Smaug in a battle of riddles.
He learns the dragon's weaknesses. He buys himself time.
It shows that intelligence and cunning can be just as powerful as brute strength. But Smaug, he doesn't just stay in the mountain, does he?
Unfortunately not.
He attacks Lake Town, causing incredible destruction.
It's heartbreaking.
It is. But eventually, Bard, a skilled archer, manages to find Smaug's weak spot.
And brings the dragon down.
But Smaug's death, well, it creates another problem.
The treasure. Now everyone wants a piece of it.
Dwarves, elves, the men of Lake Town, tensions escalate quickly.
And then the arrival of Dane Ironfoot with his dwarf army. Things are about to get even more complicated. It's like a powder keg waiting to explode. And caught right in the middle of it all is our dear Bilbo Baggins. It's chaos. The battle of 5 armies. Dwarves, elves, men, goblins, wargs, all clashing. It's like, you forget this was a children's story for a minute.
Yeah, it gets pretty intense. You're right. It's a huge battle. But Tolkien doesn't just throw everyone into a fight. He shows us what's driving each group. Like the dwarves, they're so focused on reclaiming their treasure, it's like they can't even see straight anymore.
Blinded by their desire. And Thorin, man, he's changed. The Thorin who started this journey with Bilbo, he's almost unrecognizable.
The treasure, that Arkenstone especially, it's got a hold of him.
It really does. It's a classic tale, you know? Greed and pride corrupting even the most noble intentions. It makes you think.
It does. And then you have the elves and the men of Lake Town. They lost so much in Smaug's attack. I mean, their homes, their loved ones. It's hard not to see their side of things, too.
Right. Bard, he just wants to rebuild, to secure a future for his people. He's willing to fight for it, but he's also trying to be reasonable.
Yeah, it seems like he's a lot more open to working things out than the Elven King. He's, well, a bit more stubborn.
Yeah. The Elven King, he's got his own priorities. He's all about maintaining the elves' power, their control. But then the goblins and wargs show up. Suddenly, everyone's got to put aside their differences and team up.
Wow. Talk about your enemy of my enemy situation. But it does make you think, even when things are really messed up, there can still be moments of cooperation.
Definitely. A common threat can bring even the most unlikely allies together. But let's not forget, Tolkien doesn't sugarcoat the battle. It's brutal, chaotic. He makes sure you see the real cost of war.
Yeah, there's that moment where Bilbo's watching everything from a distance, just horrified by all the death. You know, It's like, even in a fantasy story, Tolkien reminds you that war has real consequences.
Absolutely. Nobody comes out of it unscathed. But even in all the chaos, there are moments of heroism. Thorin's last stand. Despite everything he'd become, he still rallies the dwarves, sacrifices himself to protect them.
It's kind of bittersweet, right? He finds redemption, but it costs him his life. And it's his death that really turns the tide of the battle.
That and the death of Bolg, the leader of the goblins. Once he goes down, the goblin army's pretty much finished.
And the eagles. Don't forget the eagles. They swoop in at just the right moment. It's like something out of a movie.
Oh, yeah. Those eagles. They're like this symbol of hope, almost a divine intervention. But even with their help, victory comes at a heavy price. There are losses on every side.
And all that treasure they were fighting over. It suddenly seems so meaningless.
Right. It really makes you think about the futility of greed. And Bilbo, after everything he's seen, he's changed. Makes you wonder how he'll ever go back to his old life.
I know. He's gone from the sheltered hobbit to someone who understands the real cost of war, the complexities of the world.
It changes him. You see it in his decision to give the Arkenstone back to Bard.
Such a selfless act. He could have kept it, but he chose peace over personal gain. What a message, especially after all that fighting.
It shows how powerful individual choices can be, even in the middle of these huge events. Like, we might not control what happens around us, but we can control how we respond to it.
And now, the dwarves have their home back, but it's in ruins. There's so much work to be done.
It's never easy rebuilding after a conflict like that, but Bilbo stays to help.
It's incredible, right? This hobbit who couldn't even imagine leaving home is now helping to rebuild a whole kingdom.
He's found purpose and belonging in the most unexpected place.
But deep down, he knows the Lonely Mountain isn't really home. His heart's still in the Shire.
The call of home is a powerful thing, and that's where we'll pick up next time. Bilbo's journey back to the Shire and how he reconciles his experiences with his old life.
Welcome back. It's the final part of our deep dive into The Hobbit. Bilbo's faced trolls, goblins, a dragon, and now he's got to face, well, going home.
Right. It sounds simple, but it's not that easy. He's gone through so much, he's not the same Hobbit who left the Shire.
Yeah, this journey back, it's way different from when he first set out. He's not being rushed along by a bunch of dwarves anymore.
It's quiet, more reflective. Just him and Gandalf talking about everything they've experienced. I can only imagine those conversations.
Oh yeah, this must have been full of wisdom. Gandalf, he always seems to know the right thing to say. What did you think about their final farewell? Seems pretty emotional.
Yeah. There's this part where Gandalf tells Bilbo to appreciate those simple things, the things he probably took for granted before. A warm fire, good food, spending time with friends.
It's funny how it takes leaving home to realize how much those things actually matter. So when Bilbo finally gets back to his hobbit hole, does he find that comfort?
He does. He finds Bag End pretty much as he left it, but he's the one who's changed. And everyone thought he was dead. Can you imagine what it was like for them to see him back?
I bet they were shocked. Like, talk about an unexpected visitor.
Right. It's a mix of surprise, disbelief. Some hobbits even had a hard time believing his stories.
I mean, a dragon, a talking bear. It does sound kind of crazy when you put it like that.
Yeah. It must have been a little lonely for him to have experienced all that and not be able to fully share it.
I get it. So he goes back to his hobbit life, but something's different now, right?
Definitely. He's not content with just routine anymore. He's seen too much, done too much. He's got this newfound awareness and appreciation for the world around him.
So it's not about forgetting his adventure, but more like he's carrying it with him.
Exactly. It's made him a different hobbit.
It's funny, because reading those excerpts, I realized The Hobbit isn't just a children's story.
No, not at all.
It's about personal growth, finding your place in the world, facing your fears.
And that's why it still resonates with people today. Bilbo shows us that even ordinary folks can do amazing things.
And the friendships, the loyalty, the compassion. Bilbo and Gandalf, the dwarves, even Bjorn, they all help shape his journey.
Right. And those bigger themes Tolkien explores, like the battle between good and evil, the dangers of greed, the importance of fighting for what's right, even when it's hard, those are things we all deal with.
They are. So as we wrap up our deep dive into The Hobbit, what stands out to you most? What really struck you about this story?
I think it's the reminder that adventures are about more than just treasure and glory. They're about self-discovery, the connections we make, the choices we face. And, it's interesting because this story, it's really just the beginning.
Oh, you mean because of The Lord of the Rings?
Exactly. The Hobbit sets the stage for that whole epic saga. So maybe this deep dive has sparked something in our listeners, Maybe they want to explore Middle-earth further to see how Bilbo's journey impacts everything that comes after.
That's the beauty of a good book, right?
Yeah.
It leaves you wanting more. It makes you think.
Yeah.
And The Hobbit definitely does that. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time.